Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Subcommittee on Homeland Security. Today we are marking up the fiscal 2019 appropriations bill for the Department of Homeland Security. This is the final bill of the 12 annual appropriations bills to go to markup, and I'd like to congratulate Chairman Frelinghuysen and my fellow Subcommittee Chairman and all the members of the Appropriations Committee on all of their hard work. The issues addressed in this bill are both challenging and critical to the security of this great country. I would like to first thank Chairman Frelinghuysen for entrusting me with the opportunity to chair this committee, and although I've only been chair for 2 months, we've seized opportunities to learn all that we can with respect to Homeland Security, including a tour of the border with CBP and the Coast Guard, and it's been exciting, and the work we've done so far is just the beginning. I'd also like to thank my good friend, Ms. Roybal Allard, for her work on this bill and her partnership, and she's been very generous with her time and has graciously shared her experiences and insights on these complicated issues. While I know that there are aspects of this bill that she and others cannot support, I'm grateful for what I've learned from her, and this bill is a better product because of input from members of both parties. Additionally, while I'm pleased with what we have included thus far to ensure that we uphold our nation's laws, we also uphold our values. With regard to families, this legislative package includes various provisions to focus on reporting, best practices, compassion, and simply uses our hearts, not just our heads, as we adhere to the rule of law. Just some of the concepts which we enact this mission via this legislation are increased support for rescue beacons in border crossing areas. These save lives of people who are on an arduous journey many of us can't even imagine. New funding for mental health care for children in CBP custody, and language to prioritize family reunification. To my ranking member and others, I sincerely look forward to continuing to work with all of you to strengthen our support for children and families in advance of full committee markup. In the spirit of bipartisanship, this subcommittee, like all of our partners to the full Appropriations Committee, took a strong member-focused approach to building this legislation. While member requests numbered approximately 2,500, we were able to accommodate approximately 83% of those requests in this legislation. Further, in the spirit of bipartisanship, I'd like to point out that Democratic members of the House were responsible for 77% of the total requests made to this subcommittee.
One more time.
77%. Very busy. Last, before I get to the details of the bill, I'd like to thank Judge Carter and his staff for his work which contributed to this process for this mark. His hard work before handing me the gavel on this subcommittee left us all in a good working position as a committee. Now, the bill provides $58.1 billion in discretionary funds to provide the brave men and women of the Department of Homeland Security with the resources they need to secure our borders, enhance national security, and prepare for and respond to disasters. Within this amount, $5 billion is included for new border technology and the construction of barriers to fill critical gaps along the southwestern border. This recommendation was informed by the analysis completed by the men and women on the front lines protecting us, those at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Congress tasked them to review what was needed along the U.S.-Mexico border to impede and deny illegal entry into this country. This funding will provide the technology and physical barriers in the highest priority locations they identified. It has become very clear to me in my role as chairman of this subcommittee that this funding for barrier and technology is essentially part of the three-legged stool of border security. We have focused this legislation on adequate funding for the physical barrier with $5 billion for wall and associated structures, modern technological solutions, and manpower with increases to total staffing at ICE of approximately 400 and CBP of 500. I encourage anyone who would characterize a single piece of this three-part strategy as anything less than mission critical to further investigate. They should learn from the men and women who serve our country each day in these roles. These resources will primarily be focused at the mission-critical areas for drug and human trafficking. This is especially important in the Rio Grande Valley, in which CBP has prioritized border security infrastructure. As my colleagues on this committee know, the Rio Grande Valley sector has the highest number of apprehensions along the southwest border at over 137,000 last year alone. Even more, this sector has the highest volume of narcotics seized by the Border Patrol. I encourage each member of this committee to consider the crisis of drug abuse in America as they cast their vote in support of the policies of this legislation. Drug overdoses killed roughly 64,000 people in the United States in 2016 and is now the leading cause of death of those under the age of 50. I firmly believe this legislation puts on footing to be one step ahead of the cartels and their billion-dollar criminal industry traversing our border. Funding included not only hardens the RGV, but also sectors our intelligence has shown are the next logical steps for the cartels to drive their trafficking. We're breaking the cycle of crime, being the leading edge in this battle. This bill also provides $223 million for CBP to make significant progress towards 100% scanning of all vehicles, cargo, and pedestrians coming through our ports of entry along the southwest border. If we want to stop the entry of illicit goods and narcotics, if we want to do all that we can to end the opioid epidemic, if we want to break the networks of human traffickers, we need to check every vehicle and every person that comes through our ports. This bill puts CBP on a path to achieve 100% scanning of all southwest borderland ports of entry by 2025. And one last note on CBP with regard to our nation's opioid crisis. I'm proud that this bill funds $108 million specifically for opioid detection at international mail and express consignment facilities. Our bill also fully funds the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which adjudicates immigration and citizenship benefits for over 8 million individuals each year who choose to enter this country through the appropriate legal channels. Each year, approximately 700 to 750,000 individual American citizens have persisted through lengthy legal processes in hopes of achieving the American dream. In addition to addressing these border security and immigration policies, the bill prioritizes funding for other critical activities to ensure the safety and security of our homeland. The U.S. Coast Guard has received strong funding of $9.3 billion. This includes $140 million for the National Security Cutter Program post-delivery activities. We have a tremendous investment in TSA with $7.3 billion in funding. This includes $20 million above the administration's request to purchase and install 240 new advanced carry on-baggage screening systems, the CT scanners. These systems will keep us all safer as we travel while also expediting the security check-in process at airports throughout the nation. We've taken steps to ensure that FEMA isn't simply reacting to emergencies, but that we are supporting Prepared Now. We have funded $7.2 billion for disaster response and recovery efforts. We have also funded $3.1 billion for FEMA grant programs, including $538 million for the State Homeland Security Grant Program, an increase of 31 above last year. $661 million for the Urban Area Security Initiative, an increase of 31 above fiscal year 2018, including $50 million for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. $700 million for firefighter assistance grants, $249 million for pre-disaster mitigation grants, and $262 million for flood mapping activities. We've allocated Secret Service funding. The Secret Service, who serve a vital law enforcement mission of protecting Americans against cyber and financial crimes so prevalent in this modern time. We also ensure that we have adequate resources for their protection missions ahead of the 2020 presidential campaign cycle. Lastly, and it's so important to note the hard work of my committee staff. On my behalf and on behalf of Joe Ianello, my legislative director, I want to associate my support for the committee. I want to thank Chris Mallard, Laura Silke, Bob Yoakum, David Roth, Shana McCauley, and especially our fabulous clerk, Donna Shabazz. Thrust into the middle of a challenging process, we are facing personal challenges. In some of our lives, we've managed a very effective process together. And I also want to acknowledge Derek Newby and Matt Smith from the minority staff for their partnership with the majority staff as well. They worked extremely hard and will certainly continue to do so over the next week, leading to full committee. I urge all of my colleagues to support this mark. And before we approve this excellent legislation, I'd like to recognize our ranking member, Ms. Roybal Allard, and then our full committee chairman and ranking member for any comments they would like to make. The chair would now recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Roybal Allard.
Thank you, Chairman Yoder. I'm happy to join you at your first markup as chairman of Homeland Security Subcommittee, and you certainly have hit the ground running. I look forward to building the same kind of good working relationship with you that I had with Chairman Carter, and I believe we are already off to a very good start. I'm happy to say that the process over the last month in producing this bill has been a good one, consistent with the tradition of the subcommittee, even though there are significant parts of the bill where we are not in agreement. I'll get to those areas in a moment, but first I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a number of very positive bipartisan funding initiatives in the bill, some of which you have already highlighted, but I think deserve being mentioned again. For example, the bill provides funding above the request for an additional 371 customs officers, $3.7 million for specialized personnel to provide medical and mental health screening and referral services for unaccompanied children in CBP custody, $242 million above the request to significantly expand the use of non-intrusive inspection technology at the land of ports of entry, an increase of $10 million for the HSI Victim Assistance Program, which coordinates services for trafficking and forced labor victims who help ICE with criminal investigations, an increase of $9.2 million for child exploitation investigation programs, an increase of $2 million to increase the child care subsidy for Coast Guard personnel, a significant additional investment above the request in cybersecurity with a particular focus on election system security, and level or increased funding for FEMA preparedness grant programs. There are also many constructive reporting and oversight directives in the report, including requirements related to ICE detention standards and inspections, the treatment of families in DHS custody, and the processing of asylum seekers. The family separation fiasco of the last several weeks is testament to the need for careful oversight of the department's activities. The administration's zeal to aggressively enforce immigration law can never be an excuse to ignore the fundamental civil rights of individuals, including the right to keep one's family intact. Mr. Chairman, I also very much appreciate the lack of new controversial general provisions in the bill. While there is much that is good about this bill, there are a few areas representing a significant amount of the bill's funding that I simply cannot support. The bill would increase the average daily population in detention from the current 40,520 to 44,000 beds and support the hiring of more than 300 ICE enforcement and removal officers. Well, short of the requested 52,000 detention beds and 2,200 ERO officers, the bill would nevertheless support the administration's efforts to vastly expand immigration enforcement activities in the interior of the United States. Those efforts are increasingly upending the lives of individuals and families who have lived in this country for years or decades and are contributing members of our communities. Another major area of concern is the $4.9 billion for new border fencing. That's an increase of $3.3 billion above the requested amount. I'm simply not convinced that the benefits of this infrastructure come close to justifying the expense, which ranges between $25 million and $32 million per mile, a cost that doesn't take into consideration future year operations and maintenance. There are many other priorities in this bill and in others that we should be using this funding to support. What comes first to mind is $750 million for a heavy polar icebreaker for the Coast Guard. This funding was requested by the administration but is not funded in the bill. We should be acquiring at least 2, if not 3 heavy icebreakers in FY19. The United States is at an increasing disadvantage in the Arctic compared to the Russian fleet, and we can no longer afford to delay. And this is a major area of weakness in our national security. Among other things, I would also like to see an even stronger investment in new customs officers, an increase above last year for the Science and Technology Directorate, and a restoration of TSA's Law Enforcement Officer Reimbursement Program and visible intermodal prevention and response teams. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to continuing to work together so that by the end of this year's appropriations process, we can produce a final bill that both sides can fully support. In the meantime, I want to thank you again for your leadership as the new chairman of the subcommittee. You have been open to input from the minority, willing to find compromise whenever possible, and faithful to the institutional oversight role of the subcommittee. I also want to thank the majority staff who continue to be highly professional and collegial, and whose knowledge about the department serves the committee so very well. And I would also like to thank my own staff for the wonderful work and support that they give me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for those comments, Ms. Roybal-Allard. The chair would now like to recognize the chairman of the full committee, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Frelinghausen.
Well, thank you, Chairman Yoder. You've had a very productive 2 months, and I salute you. And may I also salute the excellent working relationship you have with Ms. Roybal-Allard. It's evident in the product you've produced. It would be an understatement to say that I'm happy that this is the final annual funding bill in any subcommittee, but I'm pleased that a bill with such complexity has been worked out in a very reasonable manner. There may be differences, sharp differences, but I think both of you showed that you're able to collaborate. You're able to collaborate with an excellent staff. Donna Shabazz and the staff on both the minority and majority side have worked very hard. There are so many agencies under this Department of Homeland Security umbrella, and in that regard, I think all of us on the committee pay tribute to the men and women in a variety of different capacities, whether they work for ICE and Secret Service or FEMA. some of these jobs are extremely difficult, at times extremely dangerous. So I don't have anything to add because the chairman has done a very good job of running through many elements of the bill. But I say with a measure of pride, which I'm sure is shared by my ranking member, Ms. Lowy, that both of you have produced a product with some degree of controversy, but a dedication that both of you have put your lives and thoughts behind it. And I'm happy to yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chair would now be welcome to have Ms. Lowy, the gentlelady from New York, and would now recognize her for her comments as well.
Thank you, Chairman Yoder and Ranking Member Roybal Allard and Chairman Frelinghuysen for holding this markup today. And Mr. Yoder, welcome to your first markup as Chairman of the subcommittee. And it's always good to see. There are clearly substantial differences in point of views, but to see the good working relationship between you and my good friend, Ms. Roybal Allard, I think is important for the future of this subcommittee. So thank you and welcome. However, it is unfortunate that House Republicans have prioritized unnecessary funds for President Trump's border wall and cruel immigration policies, rather than fighting terrorism through substantial new investments in first responder grants, or growing the economy and creating jobs through job training, making college more affordable, or research and development initiatives. I think it's important for us to note the Senate has marked up 12 bipartisan bills. They have avoided poison pill riders instead of wasting time on partisan bills with no chance of enactment. Democrats are united in opposition to large increases in ICE detention beds and hiring hundreds of new personnel to carry out the administration's overly aggressive interior enforcement policies. While other allocations are flat, this bill would waste $4.9 billion, more than the bill's entire increase. And I think that's important because this is such an important bill for all of us. So $4.9 billion is more than the bill's entire increase on a border wall. That is 3 times the president's already absurd $1.6 billion request. We have a responsibility to spend taxpayer dollars wisely, not waste them on campaign promises the public opposes and would do nothing to make us more secure. It was the president's obsession with immigration that led to the family separation travesty. We should not be enabling any more of this divisive policy. To make matters worse, the bill fails to provide any of the requested $750 million for a new Coast Guard heavy icebreaker. This is an area where Russia is vastly outperforming us. We have 2 icebreakers, one of which is so old that I understand the crew has to find replacement parts on eBay. I could hardly believe that, while our adversary has dozens. It really is an embarrassment and a disgrace. We all know that any hope for enactment of appropriations will require bipartisan bills that make sound investments. Yet again, a House Republican bill is moving us backward. As the process moves forward, I do hope this bill can be significantly improved so that we invest in real security programs. So again, I want to thank the chair and the ranking member, the staffs on both sides of the aisle. I know how much effort, experience, thoughtfulness you put in this bill, and I look forward to continue working together so we can produce a bill that we all can be very proud of. So thank you again for your very important work.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. Are there other amendments or would anyone else like to speak to the bill? Should recognize this gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar.
Yes, no amendment, just to speak. I want to say congratulations as the new chairman and working with our ranking member. A good start, a good working relationship. I do have to say, when you went down to the border, my folks that work down there that I've known for many years gave me a report. They said you asked the right questions, you were finding a balanced approach to doing the work, and we see some of that work over here. For example, one of the problems we've had is when drugs come into the United States, according to the DEA, as you know, come through the ports of entry. You put money for technology, you put the CBP officers. So I want to thank you for finding that balance between the men and women in blue and green. So the folks down there were right. You were paying attention. You were asking the right questions. So I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I also want to thank of course, the staff and the members on this, because this committee actually has taken the lead on separation of families. If you look at the record, we've added this language. I know we fine-tuned it, but we've added this for a couple years. So we've been working on the separation issues for years in this committee, so I certainly want to thank the members. I also want to thank you also on a couple of other items dealing with the, finding that balance. That's very important. We do have a couple amendments, as you know, pretty much in agreement with almost everything except for the wall, but we'll talk about that at another time. But I do want to say thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the staff for finding a balance. We want security, but at the same time, it cannot impede legitimate trade and tourism, and I think you, in many ways, did that, so I want to thank you for that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cuellar. Other comments?
Okay, you go.
No, go ahead.
Well, first, I want to thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman
Rupersberger.
and Ranking Member, for focusing and working with me on the issue of cybersecurity. We see how serious that is, other than probably nuclear weapons and some other things. That's one of the most serious issues. And unfortunately, I think Homeland Security, they have so many missions, and as it relates to cyber, we're way behind. We don't have the personnel, we don't have the money. We have some good people there, but they need help. So I think it's really important that we make that a priority, and I thank you for recognizing that. I wrote a report, and you will have the report, and you've agreed to have a hearing so that we can get started on this issue. Also, I want to acknowledge our chairman, Rodney. I've known you for a long time. I respect you. You've been fair. You've been decent. We haven't always agreed, but that's the way. That's why you have Dems and Republicans. But you've made some hard decisions, some tough decisions, but you did, in my opinion, what you thought was right. And I just want to let you know that we respect your tenure, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Rupersberger. Ms. Roybal?
Yes, there are, the minority has several amendments, but my understanding is that we will be having a full committee markup.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then we
Let
will.
me reassure you, it will be
We
next
will
week.
present those amendments during the full committee
Absolutely.
markup.
I'm sure it'll be a very quick and easy experience. Thank you. Mr. Palazzo, the gentleman from Mississippi.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on your second subcommittee markup of the year. It's quite a feat for anyone. I don't know if any subcommittee chairman has done that in the history of the committee. I don't know. I think the majority of this bill is extremely strong, focused on Homeland Security, and many of the compliments my colleagues have already presented. I also concur with. I do have some issue with the funding of the 12th and final national security cutter. Many of the comments around this table were talking about stopping illicit drugs from coming into our nation via the land border. So we're going to do 100% screening. I concur with that. I like the balance of the blue and green forces on the border. But however, the Coast Guard has a history of removing more cocaine, stopping more cocaine from reaching America via our maritime border than any other government agency. And these ships, when you look at what they do in removing illicit drugs and preventing it from ever making it into our neighborhoods and our communities and destroying the lives of our children, families, and our communities, and it doesn't. And drug abuse is colorblind. It's affecting the rich and the poor. I think this essential craft is providing not only to keep protecting our communities, but it's also providing for the national security of our nation. So I will be bringing an amendment also to the full committee to try to, restore some cuts, and I hope your committee will work with us to maybe find some offsets. So, and again, congratulations, and I think this is a great bill.
Thank you, Mr. Plaza. Further comments? If there are no amendments or additional remarks, the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Culberson, for a motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no. The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Good job. Thank you, everyone. I ask unanimous consent that staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the following report.
Next week is
Without objection.
That's great. You do quick meetings. That's what we need.
Next week is gonna be a fast.
Yeah. Less than an hour on that. More.
Yes. Okay.
Hey, thanks.
Heading back.
It'll be in